Everyone. The Metals Department is very excited to host artist Attai Chen here for a weekend workshop intimately exploring material in relation to creative language. Attai Chen holds a graduate degree from the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich. He was the recipient of the Herbert Hoffman Prize in 2010, the Oberbayerschere Prize in 2011, and the Andy Prize for Contemporary Art in 2014. Chen exhibits internationally in both solo and group endeavors. Most recently, his solo exhibition, Matter of Perspective, at Gallery Loop in New Jersey, which opened on the 12th of November. He also belongs to many collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, Die Neue Sammlung in Munich, and the Israeli Museum of Art in Jerusalem, to name a few. Chen's rigorous and dedicated approach to material investigation brings a refreshing insight to the field of art jewelry. Rather than assume the preconceptions that surround material, rather than adopt ideas of limitations or blindly accept truths, Chen's approach is as if he is being introduced for the first time and time again. What unbound possibility exists in the reinvention and the discovery? What joy comes from the surprise and learning that we simply cannot know anything for sure? In day 2 of our workshop, I've seen steel wool become skin, a dish sponge become a hilly landscape, and a cotton ball become a firework. Attai, thank you for helping us to see the magic. Please join me in welcoming Attai Chen.
Well, thank you, Emily, for these lovely words. And, of course, Iris for inviting me, and Cranbrook. Well, I will talk a bit about where I am from and how I came to do jewelry, and a bit about my jewelry, so hope you will enjoy it. Well, I'm from Jerusalem originally, but in the last 9.5 years, I live in Munich, Germany. Okay, so few words about Jerusalem. I know everybody heard about Jerusalem before, I guess. Where it's a very intriguing place, but I want to approach it from the nature perspective. My work, as you would see, is very much connected to nature. I investigate how nature, all the cyclical motions in nature, decay, growth, and colors in nature, colors of materials, and all these kind of things maybe comes from the fact that I was surrounded by very, very subtle shades of colors. Jerusalem is, from one hand, is built on the mountain. I mean, this is where I was born. This is like En Kerem. It's a really small place next to Jerusalem. It's actually a part of Jerusalem. So you can see it's quite a Mediterranean view. Yeah, this is kind of the hills, the kind of nature, the kind of colors. I'm showing it because you will see that it's very much this kind of subtle greenness. It will be later on a big shock for me when I came to Europe and moved to live to Europe. So the whole color range changed, and I dealt with these relationships. Yeah, the olive wood, the olive tree, as the stones, the earth. And then from the other hand, when you just stand on Jerusalem, this is all one side of Jerusalem. When you will look from the other side of Jerusalem, you will see a desert. So I guess that this kind of balance is quite amazing. I was studying in deSalle Academy, my first degree in the jewelry department, and this is actually the view from one direction from deSalle. Back there you would see the Dead Sea, and from here on until Persia, it would be desert. And from the other direction you would see, something like this, more or less. So this kind of extreme, this kind of borderlines, this kind of dryness and vividness, what for me was vividness and green, is very much present. So this is deSalle. I knew this place because come from a family that most of the people studied in this academy. It's one of the most recognized academies or universities or institutes for art and design in Israel, which placed, as I said, in Jerusalem. I came to this place because it was quite like, I was all the time interested in art. I got it from home, and somehow it was quite obvious for me that I would land there in a certain point. So when I was 22, I decided to go to study there. Before that, I was painting. I did my high school, I majored in art, I was painting, mainly two-dimensional sculpturing, but somehow I didn't want to go to the department of fine arts. I had a bit of problem with this department. Maybe I heard too much about it. But somehow I wanted to go to learn crafts. I wanted to investigate the connection between craft and art. I had a problem with the abundance of material understanding in the fine arts department, at least there. I'm not talking in general. Maybe there are departments in fine arts that still work directly with the material. And in this point, the jewelry department was a big mixture between soft and hard materials. It was a really interesting thing because it was a department for clothing, not for fashion, if it makes sense, and metalwork. So this range of material really, really interested me and fascinated me. So I started to work with silver and with metals. Immediately when I came there, I met Vered Kaminsky, which was my, let's say, my main tutor in the department. And I kind of fell in love with silver working. I was fascinated by the way that she works, and by that it kind of drew me inside to try to investigate the metal from a different way. As you see, this is like the first stuff that I did, like in the first year. It's very, very what it is, but very simple. But it was always to do with nature. And I mean, this ring series was like my first year, the first ring series that I have to make, and it's already dealt in a very, very, very direct way with the seed, then the growth of the seed into realization, and then somehow this kind of printout of cracked ground and just the memory of the seed that was there. So yeah, this is very simple, direct first year, but yeah. Well, but still, I had a problem because deSalle was very much pulling, at least in the jewelry department, to the direction of design. It felt a bit that somehow the jewelry department feels a bit underappreciated or under pressure to become a product design department. So most of the methods to approach the creating system, which would have been the natural way of having a concept, building a story, making a lot of sketches, get the approval from the teacher, and then you have another week to actually realize it in the material. So I had a lot of troubles with it because I fell in love with the material. And then I didn't want to work from the idea, not necessarily, let's say. I wanted to develop my own way, how you can develop, how you can treat the material in a different way, how you can create the raw material and then from it continue working. And I got the courage to do it because Philip Sayet, he's a jewelry artist out of Amsterdam, he came to give us a workshop, and he kind of said, okay, what is beauty? And beauty is a forbidden word in a design debate. I mean, nobody talks about beauty. I mean, how can you define beauty? Beauty has to be justified by proportions, by I don't know what. So I said, okay, what is beauty for me? Well, I went to see some orchid greenhouse the day before, and I said, wow, orchids are very nice in a sense. I mean, the different kind of things. So I will create an orchid. And then I started to work intuitively. This was like the starting point. And then I made this piece. And I started, it was the first thing that I liked that I did, because there was something about it that I tried to take from the orchid something that it represents. If it's the formal, if it's the texture, if the color, I don't know exactly what I tried to do, but this was exactly the idea. I didn't have to justify what I do, I just did. And it freed me in a way, or it convinced me that there is another way of creating. So when I've been in my third year, I decided, I got like a task to make my own project, which would be like almost a final project. It's like a pre-final project, which will be in the end of the third year, that you have a project that nobody gives you an assignment, you have to build up the assignment. So what I did, I created my own sheet of silver made out of a lot of layers of silver, and I didn't clean it, so it was like with all the flux and borax and all this stuff and soldering material. I just took, I don't know from who of you that do jewelry or know about jewelry, is up there is it's a copper experiment, here it's a silver experiment. So I took a lot of layers of silver and I just put it through the mill. Then I solder it, fold it, and then again and again and again, and then I created this kind of shape that, or texture that really looked like a tree bark. And then I could start to work with silver. First time I feel that I started to work with silver in my own way. Because for me it was very hard. It's like trying to sketch on a plain paper that doesn't have anything on it, that it's like completely new. And it's still very hard for me, I mean, to sketch on a very white paper. So I needed to make it dirty. I needed to create a raw material, and then from it start to create a conversation with this specific raw material. So this is the silver sheet that I created, and then I started to gather it, and I forged it, diffused it, soldered it, and then I made like a series of 3 containers. And the critique was quite tough, because what is this? What is the design about it? And I didn't know. I mean, what is the design about it? I have no idea. It was what it was. So they are like a hand size, kind of. The small ones would be like more or less like this size. But I did like it, and this was what is important for me in this sense. Then I reached the 4th year, and we had to make a final project from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. And of course, it was with a lot of reviews, and again, you had to build the concept. And my concept was to buy an ounce of gold and create a jewelry piece out of it. And no, I will go backwards first. My concept was, I was traveling in this beginning of the year, and I bought my first laptop. It was 2006 or 2005. And for me, I started to think about the idea. I mean, what is the era of, I mean, this is the time of the first iPod, let's say, or iPad, or not iPad, iPod or iPhone or whatever. Only this kind of starting of this kind of screens. I mean, 2005. I mean, at least in Israel. I guess that here in the US it was maybe a year before. Anyhow, I started to think about, I'm a craft maker. I'm working with material. This is my starting point. And what would be with crafts in a digital era? What is the relationship between gold or metal or any kind of material, and what is the right of existence? I mean, what is the difference between a picture, a photo that is like printed on a paper, and a picture that is projected in a screen? I mean, they have different lives. They age different. One is aging, one doesn't age. Maybe it only ages in the memory, but it doesn't age physically. So I said, okay, what will be if I will take an ounce of gold and I will work with it, and I will make one jewelry piece out of this ounce of gold, and I will take a picture of it, I will save it on the key or on the computer, and I will melt it down. So it won't exist anymore physically. And then I will build another piece out of it. And then I would take a picture and I will melt it down. And from this material, I will make another piece. And so on and so forth. And then what will be, so I dealt again with this kind of motion of growth. And then, okay, how do I decay it? So now it's like realization, it's opening as a very nice flower. I mean, it was because I worked with fine gold, I wanted to relate back to the history of jewelry, like to go more in a very direct and very plain way to the history of decorative arts, how the Romans or before that in different cultures dealt with fine gold, because they were the only one actually that made actually jewelry from 24 or 23 carats. I mean, in this time, Egypt. So when I came to this flower, I said, okay, what is the next stage? Well, the next stage would be to start to draw it through, I don't know how you call it in English. There is this tool to make strings out of iron with holes in it. Draw what? Sorry? Yeah. So I pulled it. I started to pull it until I got, until I got a piece of string. Well, from this I created another series, and then from this I created the last series, which is just few images. I don't want to tie you with too many images, but I made like something like 48 images. This is the last one that I casted it into a chunk, and then I started to roll mill it, and then I start to sort it out. So it looks like this kind of leaves. I sort it out until dust, and I always wanted to make a piece made out of the dust of what you saw, and I never knew how to do it. But here I had the God platform. I can just use the image. And then I melted it into a chunk, another kind of thing. And then I took a very primitive screen. This would be about 6 centimeters, would be something like this size. You will see soon on the body. And I separated the image from the material. So I presented the material that holds the memory of all this recycled thing, and then a screen that I just took the most plain screen that I could find, and I didn't want to redesign the outfit or to redesign the container, let's say, the screen. I just set it like a stone, you see, like as a brooch. Just set it from 4 corners. And then I put it on the body. So you can either use it as a slideshow, you can also put it as this flower, and that was the question. Is it has a right to exist as its own? What we lose? I mean, we take everything except of the material. We put the jewelry piece in the place that it should be. We have an image of it, but we don't have the material. Did it lose something? Did it gain anything? So this was my question in this sense. Well, going back, my traveling, I went to Amsterdam first time since I was a kid, but with the new eyes. Vered Kaminski organized some exhibition of her and another exhibition of some selected students, and she called the exhibition Adversity, and it was held in Gallery Ra. Gallery Ra was one of the first, or the first contemporary jewelry gallery. It was 76, I think, no, 76. Now it's celebrating actually 40 years. And for me, it was like awakening. I mean, we're so isolated in Israel, although it's so close to Europe, but it's mental isolation and also bubble kind of thing, feeling like an island because of the political situation and everything. So you only learn about the field of art jewelry or contemporary art jewelry or author jewelry, or I don't know how you want to name it. You only learn about it from the books, that the books comes really late, and you only see images, and there are very limited amount of contemporary art jewelers in Israel, and there are no galleries of contemporary jewelry in Israel. So for me, coming to Amsterdam, that there was at least, in Amsterdam there was two galleries back then, Louis Smith and Galeria. Now it's different. And there was Marseille outside of Amsterdam. But anyhow, it was a very exciting time because there were few exhibitions in the city deal with jewelry, and it was first time that I really saw it. I saw pieces that I saw in books, and I saw people coming to opening, and I saw a big debate about what is jewelry, and I said, hey, we need something like this back home as well. So 5 guys of us from the class decided to found a gallery in Jerusalem, non-profit gallery that will create some kind of house for contemporary jewelry. We were very naive. It was big on us, definitely. The participants were Nava Silberberg, Dana Hakim, Jonathan Ashur, Rip Chopin, and me. So we were 5 of us. We all studied in the same class, and we graduated. And during the 4th year, which was the last year of our exhibition, of our studies, we started to develop this idea. Some of us went to Amsterdam as well, so we kind of said, hey, what do we do after the study? I guess that most of the people ask themselves. So we took an amazing house in the center of Jerusalem, and we rented it, and we had the luxury that they was kind of a bit falling off house, and we could break walls, put stuff, and we created a gallery. The name was Ziggurat. Ziggurat is one of kind of building from the Ashurian time that were kind of like pyramids. And this is a symbol of civilization because it's one of the first, let's say, cultural civilization, whatever, that identify with the Western world. So we called it Ziggurat. So here, this is like the gallery space. The photo is really bad, but this is what I have, unfortunately. So here we're kind of painting the floor. So we really had no budgets. We built plaster walls, and we paint the wall, we install stuff, and then we made the first exhibition out of framework. This was 2007, yeah? Out of framework, which was, we exhibited our work we exhibited our final project from deSalle and some new pieces that we were working on. So this was the first exhibition. So this is how it looked like. We kind of got some showcases from museums they didn't need to. So it was kind of a schnorr, I don't know how you call it, like beggar's gallery. It's unbelievable that with the budget that we had, we managed to do it. So the space was amazing, really amazing space. So this is a bit of the exhibition. This was the second exhibition that we made an open call, and we invited some Israeli jewelers to make a piece on the theme of a man is but a mold of his natural landscape, which to say, I don't know if it's also in English, but in Hebrew we say it. So that was the idea. So we invited few artists to exhibit, and what was fascinating that it was really full in openings, much fuller than what I see in galleries like in Munich or whatever, because people needed it, students needed it, professors needed it, and it was in Jerusalem. And in Israel it's like this, that in the last, 20 years, Tel Aviv is like becoming the culture city, and nobody goes out of Tel Aviv to see exhibition, but somehow we managed to raise people from Tel Aviv to come to Jerusalem to watch and to see an exhibition. It was fascinating for us. Yeah. And then the last exhibition, unfortunately, was made, we invited Vered Kaminsky to make an exhibition. We even managed to get some budget to produce a small catalog. So this is actually the cover of the catalog, and this is how she, sorry. This is how she decided to display her pieces. So she gave us the authorization to go and dig in her boxes, like even in experiments and stuff that she never showed before, because she's quite a famous jewelry artist. So it was for us a very, very interesting process to go through, and we exhibited something like 180 pieces of her in the space. Some of them are here and some of them are in another place, but unfortunately it was extremely too early for me, at least. I said that for me it was too big. It was amazing, fascinating, but I needed to go to study more. I wanted to go out, and so I left the project, and unfortunately afterwards it also the project collapsed because of kind of, it's very hard to make business with friends. Different ideas, different thing, and I guess also it was quite early, so some of us went to study further afterwards. But it was good that it was. I mean, I think it was an important step, especially for me, of course for me, but I think it was a nice project after all. So I went to Munich, which Munich is considered kind of, let's say, capital of contemporary jewelry. There are like main events there and stuff, so it definitely draws a lot of attention. And I decided to go first time to Munich to the Schmuck event, which is, I guess the ones that are from the jewelry field here know exactly what it is, but for the ones that are not, it's like there's an international trade fair or handwork fair in Munich, and inside of it there is a very small section of jewelry show. And this jewelry show is already running for at least 60-something years. And it used to show somehow, each time there's another curator that curates it, that invite one person that invites to choose from whatever is out there. I mean, from people that apply actually, but...
I think it was 720 people sending in this year.
Yeah, so it's like, there is like 700 people, one curator that has to choose from the 700 people, and each person can send about 10 pieces, so it's kind of a tough job, I guess, to decide from 7,000 or 5,000 pieces what to show. So it's supposed to show what's going on in the contemporary jewelry or the jewelry world today, which it's of course a bit biased and stuff, so it could be complicated. But anyhow, it is a main event, and there's nothing like this anyway yet. They're so established, so everybody's going there. And since then, around the city, they came like slowly in the last 10 years, a lot of pop-up exhibitions, like students, other artists from all over the world come and rent a space for 10 days or for a week in the duration of the show, and kind of open up and showing whatever. So it has a really nice atmosphere. I mean, last year there was something like 70, 80 exhibitions around the city, which most of them were not curated, so they were kind of, each one that find a place can show his work, and it would be exposed to quite a lot of people that comes to consume this. Anyhow, but this was my first time, 2007. I went to Schmuck. This is how it looks in the hall there, the exhibition, and I was really fascinated. I was blasted, and I said, hey, I need to come here. I mean, I need to be here. And I came because of Otto Kunzli as well. I also was selected to show my piece in this exhibition, in this Schmuck show first time, so I definitely had to go. I wanted to see it there. So I met with Otto Kunzli, which was a big figure in the field, and for me personally also, I was very recommended by Vered Kaminsky, which was very much my mentor back then, to go and speak with him, and if I am interested to study, to ask him if I may join. So I went, I had an interview, and he accepted me, and then a few months later I landed in Munich in the Art Academy. So this is the Art Academy of Munich. And suddenly I was exposed to completely different nature. It's not that my first time in Europe. I used to visit Europe quite often, but I mean, all this color range, I suddenly started to pay attention to, because I was dealing with colors of nature and with textures of nature, and in my work in this time, I started to see it differently, and I started to collect branches and stuff, like in the city, and see all these fungi. They don't exist in Israel, this kind of fungi, almost not, because it's too dry. You don't have this richness of colors and growing things. So I started to work on this kind of thing, and I started to take this raw material that I created and created kind of sticks out of sheets, very, very fine sheets of silver that I will diffuse together. So it's all hollow. It's not like casted branches. It's, I don't know, could work a week on one branch or whatever. So then I started to use enamel as well, and to start to create this kind of patinas. And then I created this series, which this is a part of the series. I think I made like 20-something branches. And I started to pay attention to parasites and all these kind of things that grows. But they are invented, except the one in the middle that is kind of that has this kind of hand. That's really what I decided. I would take one branch and I would try to copy it one to one. So the rest is just it's branches that I actually recreated. I was very much inspired by the growth way in nature, that cells are kind of compounding on each other, and kind of by this creating a form, like a patchworking way of growing, like a ring on a tree or tree barks. Yeah, so this is like a few close-ups. Then I decided to make a bunch of cocoons from different metal alloys. So apparently I was quite influenced by Otto back then, because he made a huge, amazingly project once about a misshapen of a Mickey Mouse contour. It was a very interesting installation, but never mind that. But the idea was that I try each time to use different material a bit, or a different way of creating my own cocoons. And I also made then I exhibited both of them. But I said, so what? Okay, so I'm now imitating nature, and of course nature does it much better than me. But I was all for the process of making them. This was the thing. I mean, to kind of meditate in a sense and create layer over layer. And so I kind of try to unite with the material in a sense. Very romantic, but this is what I was looking for. So I said, I was quite stuck, and I decided, okay, let's take it somewhere else. Let's create stuff that doesn't exist in nature from this kind of thing. So I add some rivets or screws to create this kind of contrast. Back there is like some kind of a more mobile mechanism. So it kind of hangs always in the middle. No matter which movement you do, it kind of rolls to the center of the weight. So I created few creatures, I mean, I wanted to do some things that gives a memory of an artifact, a memory of a creature or something, but then it's not. So the bottom is a real found piece of wood, and all the upper part, this warmish thing, is a wood that like a branch that I created, let's say. Yeah, this I also created by accident. In this stage, I kind of wanted to check the border between abstract and stuff that we identify as a certain shape. So actually, I wanted to make from this kind of hollow forms, I wanted to create a branch, but then it looked for me like this kind of head of deer. But then why? Just because it has an eye, or that I put this composition of putting these two plumps on the head, relative symmetrical for both sides. I mean, if the eye wasn't there and I would put this part here won't be a shape of a face. So it was kind of very interesting for me. Where is the borderline? Where is figurative? Where is abstract? I created this one because I was invited to some gem, precious stone exhibition in some kind of gemology museum in gemology museum in Israel, very small one. So they gave us some raw stones, and this is a cordite, I think it's. I don't know exactly what stones it is, but anyhow, it was something that I was given, and I created this kind of ring. So it's silver enamel, and this laba. It's not a laba. That's the thing. I think it's a meteor. It's a stone come from meteors. But I was quite stuck. Well, back then I had long hair. I was really stuck. I mean, the studies in Munich was really tough. It was tough. It was the toughest that I had. I mean, deSalle was tough because we had so many assignments and barely had time to sleep or to do anything. But the Munich Academy was so tough because we had no rhythm, no assignments, nobody there, in a sense, that you come for a different culture, different language, and you come to this amazing building or amazing class with amazing history of a lot of good artists that came out, or you study with some of them that they're like in the 6th year and they already have galleries and won prizes, and you're in this kind of pressure, but there's nobody pressuring you actually. Otto Künzli is not there really. He's coming once a week, maybe. I mean, no, sometimes he comes, but I mean, there's once a week some class meeting that we all come and talk about certain themes, but not necessarily about your work or anything. So I was really lost. So this is like the second year, the end of the second year there, that I'm really kind of thinking of losing or leaving this field because I don't know what to do anymore with myself, with jewelry. So I started playing with paper. I always perceived paper as a sketching material. You know, in the design academy, you build from paper models of something that should be something else. Pretty much like if you would use wax in order to cast it later in metal, but you never appreciate the wax itself as its own identity or its own right to exist, the qualities. And this is what happened to me with paper. I mean, I wanted to make sketches of things with paper, but and it's not that I need to work with metal. I mean, yes, I was trained to work with metal, but I'm in Munich now, and most of the students around me work with all sorts of materials, but I'm somehow kind of clinging into metal because this is how I was educated, or this is where I feel safe. So I can appreciate jewelry from other material by other people, but for me, I cannot do it. I mean, but then I started to create structures and discover things that the paper cannot, that definitely no other material can create for me. Working with metal in the way that I worked with the metal took me like ages. It took me like few months to work on one of these previous pieces that I made, because you cannot make mistakes, or each step will take you a week to do, and then if you don't like it, how you break it and you build something else or whatever. And the paper, I could suddenly work in I can make a piece in like a few days. I can work really spontaneously. I can work quickly. I can build really complex structures and create jewelry that is actually huge, but it's light because it's made out of paper. I cannot do such a thing from metal. There's no way. You cannot cast it. You cannot solder it. You even cannot electroform it. this is just what it is. And I started to appreciate the properties of the material. And from that on, I started to understand, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to choose material. I want to work with the material. I want to learn where the borderlines, what the material can give me that other material. I mean, to justify why I work with a certain material. Why to try to force it to be metal? The field is not there anymore. I mean, it's not that jewelry even has to be stable. It's not even that jewelry has to be remain for always. And anyhow, but I did want that the jewelry would be wearable, so I did find ways to apply the material, and I discovered, hey, it's much more stable than wood. I mean, wood in this thin sheets will break with snap immediately, but paper doesn't snap. Paper has fibers that go to all the directions. So actually it's like a sponge. I can suck it with acryl-based, water-based color glues, and it will hold. It will become a very strong material. And so this was one of the first pieces that I made. So it goes on with this. So I started to investigate form and color. So at the beginning it was quite shy with the color. Black and white, white paper, graphite, white color. I was working with a sheet of paper that it's more a cardboard, but it's something between a cardboard and a paper. It's a very thin passepartout paper, which would be something like 0.6 millimeter, which I don't know in inches how much it is, but sorry about that. So I started to go back to painting or to drawing, and I took this sheet, I put some gesso on it, Grund, and I started to make sketches or just shades with a pencil. And then I had this kind of thing, and then I started to cut out parts of it. And then I had like a whole pile of material that I cut out, and in some places I cut into, because you can bend cardboard if you make like half-deep cuts. If you make lines that are next to each other, you can curve it. If you make across lines, you can then curve it to 2 dimensions, like you can make a spiral. So in this sense, I started to cut it in such a ways, and it's exactly like I used to work with metal before, but I didn't see it. I didn't know it back then, that it's exactly the same thing. I'm creating a raw material, and I'm patchworking. I'm just destroying a sheet and working and gluing and creating a hollow form. So I didn't have any idea what I want to do exactly, but I knew that I want to capture form and capture movement, motion in a static form. It's like the way that I found of creating a endless form, endless movement, like a perpetuum mobile in a way, by making a static thing that creates the illusion of movement. This is what I was looking for. So of course I was very influenced by Baroque, but not because of the decorative thing, but the Baroque sends you to this kind of motion thing. So I made my diploma after 4.5 years in the academy. This was my diploma show. I started to go a bit more crazy with the colors. And here I called them free radicals, but because for me they were free radicals. They were like, it was a radicalism of my work, let's say. I was very shy with colors, so also, and then it goes back to the kind of color shades for my nature. That it's everything a bit dusty in Israel. The green is not really vivid green, it's more kind of matte kind of green. So also my colors are a bit matte in a sense. And here I try to investigate the relationship between color and shape. Those are all brooches, and they are about that size, more or less. They're a bit smaller than the first ones. These are like pendants. So I didn't have a clear shape that I would like to do. I just, the whole thing was to create some kind of conversation with the material, I say. I mean, the way that you cut the paper differently would kind of help to define the shape. If I cut it round, it will take the shape more roundish. If I cut it straight, of course it will create more straight lines. And I never use color on the pieces. So it's always, first I paint the sheet, and then I cut the material, and then I compose the piece out of the scrap material that I cut out. So this is how my desk look like when I work on a piece, more or less. So there's a lot of preparation to do. Actually, this is what takes the most time, to prepare the material. Here I'm sketching on the paper, really sketching images and kind of the concept of cubism in a sense, like breaking a form, breaking something whole and recombining it to something new. Here I try to make kind of movement because all the rest were quite stiff. And if it's a neck piece, I mean, I wanted that it will kind of sit on the body correctly. It will be ergonomic. So it's actually a lot of parts that are connected with silver and gold rings to each other, and by that it creates this kind of movement, like a mobile in a way. Not a mobile phone, like a mobile, yeah. Here I also start to create, like, from metal, from silver, kind of, yeah, see the relationship between these sheets of silver and the chain and the paper. This is, from the other hand, only from paper and cords inside. So it does have, like, hinges. This as well. So these are like kind of big necklaces. In 2012, we made an exhibition called Lunatic Swing. It was a group show that we worked on. It was in Munich. It's a big space. It's like 5 rooms of a very kind of, very kind of exciting space, very unpredictable in a sense, kind of trashy. But it's in the center of Munich, and it's a gallery that belongs to the city, so it's really nice because you have some funds to do a lot of changes in the room. So this group show was made out of Karina Shushtari, Laura Dickens, Emma Price, and Sunho Cho, and me, and Melanie Ismail, sorry. And we wanted to cover the whole walls with fabric and then create some kind of labyrinth in the space by pressing from the backside of this stretching fabric the usual normal white pedestals that we use traditionally to show artwork or jewelry works. So this was the idea. So this is how it looked like. And for this particular exhibition, I decided to create a series of I made 700 goldfish, but they weren't made of gold. They were a real fish that I bought in some Asiatic shop, like kind of nachos, chips, kind of fish, dried and salted. These are anchovies, so they're really small. They're like, will be like, I don't know, it's 1 inch, I guess, something like this, between 1 inch and a little bit more. And my idea is that each one is individual. Each one is different, looks different. I mean, I was opening this package and I started to organize it and play with them, and each one was dried in a completely different shape. I mean, each one had the wave to this direction, one was smaller, one was bigger, one had the mouth open. And I said, it's really fascinating. I mean, it's really, we see it as a mass, but we never see it as a singular. Even in English, you say fish to plural and fish for singular, which is interesting. Anyhow, so my idea was to take each fish and mummify it, like cover it with gold, not to dip it in electroforming, but really do it with traditional gold plating gilding technique with gold leaves. So each fish I operated, I connected, so I casted some part to put on the back in order that I can make it as a brooch, as a pin. And then I closed it, and then I covered it with a few layers and started to cover it with gold leaves. And then I made about 700 something. In the end, I displayed about 550 in this exhibition. So this is how it looked like. Here you can see it a bit in a better resolution. So you can really see that each one is a bit different. I decided to organize them in rows because then I started to think about this terracotta army in China, about the fact that an army is again something that is not, that you're not an individual, you have a number and you're not, you have no say about yourself or your life in this time. I mean, you have to do what you've been told. If not, you will go to jail. And this is the thing. I mean, you take humans and you turn them to a swarm. And it's exactly what we do with this fish. And yeah, something to think about it. So this terracotta army, it's also made out of single faces. I mean, I think not each one of them has a single face, but most of them has a bit, most of them are a bit different. They're supposed to represent a living soldier. Yeah, so I decided to make them individual by treating them in such a way, and then breaking it again by organizing them in rows, like, like soldiers. Okay, 2014, I won this Andy Bronfman Prize, which is a prize for contemporary applied arts in Israel. And it's a huge prize because it has a really big budget, and the nice thing, or the challenging thing about it, is that the prize is to make a solo show in the Tel Aviv Museum of Art and to publish a catalog / book, like hardcover catalog. So they have really nice funds. But the thing is that they kind of said, okay, well, good, you're about to win it. Next year you would win it. So now you have about 8 months to work on a show. We want new pieces. And the space is going to be something like 200 square meters, and then another room which is around 150 square meters. I don't know in inches how much it is, but it was like, oh, that's shocking. I mean, never did such a thing. I only did my first solo show like a year before, and it was in a very tiny gallery. And I mean, how can you deal with such a space, and how can you make so many pieces for such an occasion? I mean, without complete risk. I think it's a wrong thing to do, but it was a big challenge. So what I did in this time, I moved to live next to a forest next to Munich. I left the city a bit, and I started to observe nature from a different way again. I have a small dog, and I had to go every day to the nature with the dog. So I decided to deal with this as the starting point for my exhibition. It was very natural for me. I wanted to create some kind of dialogue between my natural habitat, the nature in Israel, and the nature in Germany. But not only the nature. It's, of course, it's starting from the nature, but it's also going to the urban. And I decided that I will make some assemblage, some crossbreeds, some hybrids of pieces. Hybrids because it should be something that is not belonging together. This is like the forest in Germany. This is the forest in Israel. So I started to pay attention to all these parasites and how things are growing on top of the other stuff that I dealt with before, but I wanted now to deal with nature and urbanism, with man-made and nature-made. So I went to this museum in Munich, and it's a museum of hunting, and the Germans, the Bavarian hunters sometimes create this kind of creatures that are hybrids, some mythological kind of hybrids out of stuffed animals. So I found it quite intriguing. So I decided to create my own hybrids. So I started to collect stuff. And this year I was flying quite a lot, Israel, Germany. I've been living in Israel in this time for like 2 months because I was teaching in the deSalle Academy, so I built myself a workshop in Israel, and I was working a bit here, a bit there. So I collected stuff from Israel. I brought some stuff from Germany. So this is how my studio started to look like in this time. And and I started to create my hybrids. My intention was to work on stuff that could be identified, but then to break the identity. So it could be some kind of artifact, it could be something archaeological, it could be something ethnical, but it could be also just a bunch of materials that are just glued or combined together. So yeah, this is how I started to make them. And then this is part of the results. So this is 2014, end of 14. But those are brooches, so you can imagine that they're about this size, more or less. This was a necklace, so it's okay, so this is the space that I got. So these 2 galleries were the space that I had to deal with. So I came with the idea of the sequence of the forest as the way that I want to install the things. So I worked with a designer and we created this kind of sequence. This is how I dealt with the space. I made something about 70 pieces, which maybe 60 were new. I showed a bit more than 70 pieces actually. So in one room I showed this body of work. So here again I deal with artificial and processed. So I took like kind of woods and created this kind of wood, but from a very raw kind of young wood, which made a very nice patina on my pieces after I opened it after half a year. Okay. Well, this was the second room. Well, actually, it's the entry room. Here I just made a preview of some paper pieces of mine that I made before, kind of introduction. Okay, and there we go. And now, actually, I started in the last year to deal with the question of space and question of dioramas. I find it's really interesting, something that starts as a 3-dimension and turned to be 2-dimension. This kind of illusion, this kind of relationship between something flat that looks deep and something deep. So I quite recently started to deal with this thing, deal with the question of perspective. I was asked to make a goblet for wine, a Judaica piece for an exhibition, so I created this goblet, which is maybe this size. It's silver, and I mean the base is silver, and it's graphite and color and foam core and silver and a lot of material. Most of it is created. Few things are ready-made. It's a bit detailed. This is the only jewelry piece that I started doing. So it's really, really fresh. I was very much occupied with this kind of praying nuts from the medieval time and with pre-Renaissance conception of perspective, conception of space. The space in art before the vanishing point theory or technique, I find it's much more individual, much more alive, much more inviting me to be part of it. I started to be very, very much fascinated by this distorted perspective, like a building that one direction of this building is going to one vanishing point and the other one for a complete different one. It doesn't make sense at all, but it creates something with so much motion into it. It's so much more alive than the perfect Renaissance perspective. So I dealt with this theme and I came out with this jewelry series that I'm exhibiting now in Gallery Loop. So here I call this series Matter of Perspective, which would be dealing with the question of perspective, question of space inside a very squeezed space. So I took this oval shape, and those are brooches. They are about this size, more or less. And I wanted to see what would be if I take a single, more or less, a single rectangular shape and try to present it in one image from different perspectives. What would it do to the space? What would it create? Of course, it goes directly to urban kind of look, because I took a rectangular shape, so of course it goes definitely to this kind of architectural models. I didn't think that there's a way that I can deal with perspectives, distorted perspective through amorphic or more organic shapes. So each time I try to search it from a different way. Some places it went really far and got a bit crazy. Some places I just used the same shape and just assemble it in a different way. Yeah, and this is now in Gallery Loop in New Jersey, so you can go and see it if you want to. If you're there in the neighborhood, it will be until the 3rd of December. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.